Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Smoke and Mirrors. Nolan Voss had always been underestimated. At 38, with his wiry build and quiet demeanor, people tended to mistake his calculation for weakness. He remembered the first time he'd met Veronica Harding at that gallery opening in Boston 5 years ago. She called him refreshingly understated compared to the hedge fund managers competing for her attention. What he'd initially taken as appreciation for his subtlety, he later recognized as dismissal. The house on Oakwood Drive was uncomfortably quiet as Nolan pretended to examine quarterly projections for his security consultation firm. In reality, he was studying his wife's expressions as she tapped away at her phone, a half-smile playing on her lips. Their marriage had been cooling for months, but it was the little things that convinced him something more sinister was brewing. Hushed phone conversations that abruptly ended when he entered rooms, unexplained withdrawals from their joint account, and that peculiar insurance policy she'd insisted they take out 3 months ago. "The plumber's coming tomorrow about that gas smell in the basement," Veronica announced, not bothering to look up from her phone. "Try to be out of the house. You know how you get with these service people, all suspicious and hovering." "Can't," Nolan replied. "I've got the Henderson proposal to finish. Deadline's tomorrow." A lie. The proposal had been submitted last week. Veronica's fingers paused over her phone screen. "Seriously? You can't give me one afternoon without your paranoia?" "It's not paranoia when they've screwed us over before. Remember the electrician who fixed our wiring and nearly burned the house down?" Another fabrication. There had never been an electrician. She sighed dramatically. "Fine. Do what you want. Just stay out of his way." Nolan watched as she retreated upstairs, her posture stiff with irritation. He waited until he heard the shower running before slipping into her home office. The room was immaculate, too immaculate. Veronica had never been organized. He methodically searched through her desk drawers, careful to leave everything exactly as he found it. In the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of old magazines, he discovered a burner phone. The text messages confirmed what he'd suspected for weeks. Veronica was having an affair. But what chilled him was the conversation from 3 days ago. "Insurance is set. Just need to make it look accidental. Gas leak is cleanest. You sure he won't suspect? Nolan? Please." The man's completely oblivious. "He trusts me completely." Nolan replaced everything exactly as he'd found it, his mind racing but his hands steady. He'd built his reputation on crisis management and threat assessment. Now he would need every bit of that expertise to survive his own marriage. When Veronica emerged from the shower, Nolan was back on the couch, spreadsheets spread before him, his face a perfect mask of concentration. "I'm going to sleep," she announced. "Don't stay up too late. Just finishing this section," he murmured without looking up. As her footsteps receded upstairs, Nolan opened his laptop and began researching the plumbing company scheduled for tomorrow's appointment. Dominic Rafferty owned Rafferty Plumbing and Heating. Former military. 2 prior arrests for assault. Charges dropped. License legitimate, but several customer complaints buried in public records. Nolan's phone buzzed with a text from his brother Theo. "Still on for fishing this weekend?" He replied, "Change of plans. Need to talk. Emergency." The pieces were falling into place. Tomorrow he would face the man his wife had hired to kill him. But Nolan Voss had never been one to walk into a trap unprepared. Chapter 2. The Unassuming Target. Nolan met his brother Theo at a diner 15 miles outside of town at 6 a.m. Despite their physical similarities, both with the same sharp features and storm gray eyes, Theo had always been the more imposing presence. A former Marine turned private security specialist, Theo's hulking frame dwarfed the booth they occupied. "You look like shit," Theo observed, sliding a coffee across the table. "Veronica is trying to kill me," Nolan replied without preamble. To his credit, Theo didn't laugh or dismiss him. Instead, he set down his mug and asked, "Evidence?" Nolan showed him photos he'd taken of the text messages, the insurance policy, the withdrawals. He explained about the plumber scheduled for later that day. "You need to call the cops," Theo said firmly. And tell them what? That I illegally access my wife's burner phone? That I have suspicions about a plumber who hasn't done anything yet? Nolan shook his head. I need concrete proof. I need to catch them in the act. That's how people end up dead and all. I'm not walking into this blind. Nolan slid a USB drive across the table. Everything I've found is backed up here. If something happens to me, it goes straight to Detective Laurel Mendez. Remember her from the Parkman case last year? She owes me a favor. Theo pocketed the drive reluctantly. What's your plan? I'm going to let them think they're succeeding. Nolan's voice was cold, detached. I'll pretend to nap on the couch when the plumber arrives. Record everything. Then slip out when they're distracted. And then what? Then I dismantle their lives piece by piece. The smile that crossed Nolan's face made even Theo uncomfortable. Nobody betrays me and walks away untouched. Across town, Veronica Voss was meeting Dominic Rafferty at a roadside motel. At 42, Dominic had the weathered good looks of someone who'd lived hard but aged well. The tattoos covering his forearms told stories of military service and prison stints he rarely discussed. I don't like this, he said, pacing the cramped room. Murder's a whole different level. Veronica reclined on the bed, her tailored business attire incongruous against the dingy bedspread. It's not murder. It's solving a problem. She twisted the wedding band on her finger. Nolan's company is about to land a government contract worth millions. With the prenup gone after 5 years of marriage and that insurance policy, we'd have everything we need to disappear. And if something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong if you follow the plan. Gas leaks happen in old houses like ours all the time. She rose and pressed herself against him. One day of discomfort for a lifetime of freedom. Isn't that worth it? What neither of them knew was that Wesley Burke, Nolan's closest friend and business partner, was sitting in a parked car across the street, documenting their meeting with a telephoto lens. The same Wesley who had introduced Nolan and Veronica at the gallery 5 years ago, consumed by guilt over bringing this woman into his friend's life. Back at home, Nolan was preparing. He placed nearly invisible motion sensors at key points throughout the house. He installed microscopic audio recorders in the living room and basement. He prepared an overnight bag and stashed it in a compartment beneath the back porch. Then he settled in to wait for the trap to spring. Chapter 3. The Sprung Trap. At precisely 1:15 p.m., the doorbell rang. Nolan watched from the upstairs window as Dominic Rafferty climbed out of a white van emblazoned with Rafferty Plumbing and Heating. He looked exactly like his license photo, tall, muscular, with a close-cropped beard and the confident posture of someone used to physical confrontation. Veronica answered the door, her voice carrying up the stairs. Mr. Rafferty, thank you for coming on such short notice. Happy to help, Mrs. Voss. Where's this gas smell you mentioned? Basement. But first, let me check if my husband is still working. He can be difficult with service people. Nolan quickly moved to the master bedroom, mussed the sheets, then made his way downstairs to the living room couch. He arranged himself in a convincing sleeping position, eyes nearly closed but allowing a sliver of vision. His phone was recording in his pocket. Veronica appeared in the doorway, studied him for a moment, then returned to the foyer where Rafferty waited. He's asleep on the couch, she said, voice lowered. Perfect timing. Follow me. As they descended to the basement, Nolan silently rose and positioned himself near the basement door, listening. The gas line is over here, Veronica was saying. I've already loosened the connection like you showed me, but I need you to make it look professional. Something that would pass inspection after they find him. And you're sure he won't wake up? Rafferty's voice echoed off the basement walls. I crushed a sleeping pill into his lunch. He'll be out for hours. Nolan smiled grimly. He'd noticed the bitter aftertaste in his sandwich and had quietly disposed of most of it after taking a few bites for show. Once you're done, Veronica continued, we leave separately. I'll go shopping, establish an alibi. When I come home, I'll find him unresponsive from the gas and call 911. By then it'll be too late. My payment, half now, half when the insurance pays out. $100,000 each installment. And if something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong if you do your job right. Her voice hardened. Don't worry about the noise. My husband's useless, sleeps all day. Just make sure that gas leak looks like an accident after you leave. Nolan had heard enough. He silently slipped to the back door, retrieving his pre-packed bag from beneath the porch. As he made his way across the backyard to the gate, he texted Theo, plan in motion. Meet at location B. He then called Detective Laurel Mendez directly. Boss, been a while. Her voice was guarded, but professional. I need your help, Laurel. My wife is trying to kill me. 40 minutes later, Nolan watched from Theo's car as police cruisers surrounded his house. He provided Detective Mendez with the recordings, the insurance documents, and the text messages Wesley had forwarded from his surveillance. They waited until Veronica emerged from the basement with Rafferty, both looking satisfied with their work. The moment the police announced themselves, the color drained from her face. Nolan stepped out of the car and approached as officers handcuffed both Veronica and Dominic. What's happening? Veronica demanded, her voice pitched high with feigned confusion. Nolan, thank God you're all right. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Detective Mendez cut her off. Mrs. Voss, we have you on audio conspiring to murder your husband via gas leak. We've also secured the tampered gas line as evidence. That's absurd. I would never. She spotted Nolan walking toward them and forced tears to her eyes. Nolan, tell them. Tell them I would never hurt you. Nolan stood before her, his expression calm as he delivered the lines he'd rehearsed. My mother-in-law was making me a lunch, but then... He paused, watching recognition flash in Veronica's eyes. I heard you planning my murder with your lover. Her fake tears stopped instantly when they read her rights. As the officers led her toward the squad car, she hissed at Nolan, this isn't over. Actually, he replied softly, it's just beginning. Chapter 4. The Depths of Betrayal. The arraignment was a media circus. Nolan sat in the back of the courtroom, watching as Veronica and Dominic were formally charged with conspiracy to commit murder. His mother-in-law, Pauline Harding, sat across the aisle, her face a mask of disbelief and rage. You set her up, Pauline spat as they exited the courtroom. Veronica would never do this. The evidence speaks for itself, Nolan replied evenly. I suggest you direct your energy toward finding her a good attorney. What Nolan didn't reveal was how deep his investigation had already gone. In the weeks since the arrests, he'd hired a team of private investigators to dig into both Veronica's and Dominic's pasts. What they uncovered was more complex than a simple affair. Back at the temporary apartment he'd rented, Nolan spread the files across the dining table as Wesley and Theo looked on. Veronica and Dominic knew each other before we met, Nolan explained, pointing to old photographs. They grew up in the same town in Pennsylvania. There are police reports of them together as teenagers. He took an assault charge for her when they were 19. So their reconnection wasn't coincidence, Wesley mused. Not even close. Nolan pulled out financial records. 3 weeks after our wedding, she started siphoning small amounts from our accounts into a shell company. The real kicker? My security company landing that government contract wasn't luck either. Dominic's cousin works in the procurement office. Theo whistled low. This was a long con. 5 years. Nolan's voice was hollow. 5 years of my life with someone who was planning my death from the beginning. What's your next move? Wesley asked. Nolan gathered the files methodically. Veronica's being represented by Sullivan Pierce, top defense attorney in the state. Somehow she's affording his $800 per hour fees despite her accounts being frozen. Someone's bankrolling her, Theo concluded. Exactly. And I'm going to find out who. Nolan's phone chimed with a notification. That's our cue. Tara Lowell just arrived at Lakeview Restaurant. Tara had been Veronica's closest friend and confidant for years. Nolan had always found her coldly calculating beneath her bubbly exterior. As he suspected, she was now serving as the conduit between Veronica and whoever was funding her defense. Nolan met her alone, presenting the carefully crafted image of a broken man seeking answers. I just need to understand why, he said, his voice deliberately unsteady as they sat at a corner table. 5 years together. Was any of it real? Tara studied him, sympathy and calculation warring in her expression. Veronica loved you in her way, Nolan. But some people aren't built for conventional happiness. Did she ever talk about leaving me? Before all this? She mentioned feeling trapped sometimes. Tara sipped her wine, choosing her words carefully. The prenup was restrictive. So this was about money? Nolan pressed, letting his voice crack slightly. Isn't it always? Tara's smile didn't reach her eyes. Look, Veronica made mistakes, serious ones. But she's still my friend. I'm standing by her. Even if she murdered me, would you have attended my funeral, Tara? She set down her glass. I should go. As she gathered her purse, Nolan reached for her hand. I'm sorry. That was unfair. I'm just lost. If you speak to her, tell her I'm willing to talk. About a settlement, about dropping charges, anything to understand why. The desperation in his voice was perfectly calibrated, and he saw Tara's moment of calculation. She was weighing whether he could be manipulated. I'll let her know, she finally said. What Tara didn't notice was the microscopic tracker Nolan had transferred to her purse when he'd reached for her hand. As he watched her drive away, Wesley's voice came through his earpiece from the surveillance van. She bought it. Heading east on Parker Street now. Stay with her, Nolan instructed, and call Laurel. I want everything legally admissible. Within 3 hours, they had their answer. Tara led them straight to Gregory Harding, Veronica's uncle and Pauline's brother. The wealthy real estate developer had always despised Nolan, considering him beneath his niece. Now, they had proof he was funding Veronica's defense and coordinating her strategy from outside. It's bigger than we thought, Detective Mendez told Nolan later that evening. Gregory Harding's financials are intertwined with half a dozen shell companies similar to the one Veronica was feeding. We're looking at a potential money laundering operation spanning years. Using my marriage as cover, Nolan concluded. Potentially, Laurel hesitated. We need more evidence to bring charges against Gregory. Right now, paying for his niece's attorney isn't illegal. What do you need? Access to his financial records, communications with Veronica prior to her arrest, anything linking him to the murder plot. Nolan's expression hardened. Give me 2 days. Chapter 5. The Architect's Design. Gregory Harding's estate sprawled across 5 acres of prime Massachusetts coastline. The mansion, with its perfectly manicured grounds and private beach access, screamed old money and privilege. Precisely the image Gregory had cultivated despite having built his fortune through methods that rarely withstood scrutiny. Nolan had never been invited inside during his marriage to Veronica. Now, he stood in Gregory's wood-paneled study under very different circumstances. You have remarkable nerve showing up here, Gregory said, not bothering to rise from behind his massive desk. At 62, he maintained the fitness of a man 20 years younger, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his tailored suit immaculate. I thought it was time we spoke directly, Nolan replied. No intermediaries. About why you orchestrated a 5-year con ending with my murder. Gregory's laugh was dismissive. Your paranoia is embarrassing, Nolan. Veronica made a terrible mistake getting involved with that plumber, but suggesting I orchestrated anything is absurd. Then explain why your name appears on the incorporation documents for Meridian Holdings. The shell company Veronica was feeding with my money since week 3 of our marriage. The flicker in Gregory's eyes was almost imperceptible. I have investments in dozens of companies. My financial advisors handle the details. And I suppose they also handled the 7 phone calls between you and Dominic Rafferty in the week before he was scheduled to kill me. This time, Gregory couldn't hide his surprise. You're bluffing. Nolan placed a folder on the desk. Phone records don't lie. Neither do the offshore accounts you've been using to move money between your development projects and certain government officials. The FBI finds that kind of thing fascinating. What do you want? Gregory's voice had lost its condescending edge. I want to know why. Was I just a convenient path to my company's government contracts? Or was there something personal? Gregory stood slowly, pouring himself a whiskey without offering one to Nolan. Your security firm was a bonus, not the objective. The reality is much simpler. You were never going to be family. Veronica needed someone pliant, someone who would adore her enough to miss the warning signs. You fit the profile. And the murder plot, an unfortunate escalation. The original plan was divorce after accessing your company's government contracts. Veronica grew impatient. With your encouragement, Gregory shrugged. Time is money, and she always was impressionable. Nolan nodded slowly, processing the cold calculation of it all. You should know I recorded this entire conversation and obtained access to this meeting legally with your secretary's documented permission. For the first time, genuine alarm crossed Gregory's features. You're wearing a wire? Welcome to the 21st century, Gregory. Everything's digital now. Nolan gestured to the innocent-looking pen in his breast pocket. Detective Mendez sends her regards. She'll be arriving with a warrant shortly. As if on cue, sirens became audible in the distance. Gregory's face contorted with rage. You think this changes anything? People like me don't go to prison, Nolan. We own the system you're trying to use against me. Perhaps. Nolan moved toward the door. But I've learned it's not about the system. It's about leverage. And right now, I have all of it. Within an hour, Gregory Harding was being escorted from his mansion in handcuffs, charged with conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, and wire fraud. The case against Veronica and Dominic strengthened exponentially with Gregory's involvement documented. That evening, Nolan sat alone in his temporary apartment, staring at the wedding photo he still hadn't discarded. 5 years of his life dedicated to a woman who had never loved him, orchestrated by a man who had seen him as nothing more than a stepping stone. His phone rang, Theo checking in. They're all in custody, Nolan said flatly. Gregory, Veronica, Dominic, even Tara for accessory after the fact. That should feel like a win, Theo observed when Nolan didn't continue. It's not enough. What more could you want? They're facing serious prison time. Nolan set down the photo. They took 5 years of my life, Theo. They invaded my home, my business, my bed, all while planning my death. Prison isn't enough. Nolan, Theo's voice carried a warning. You've won. Don't cross lines you can't uncross. But Nolan had already begun formulating the next phase of his plan. Legal justice would never be sufficient for what they had done. True retribution required something more personalized. I'll call you tomorrow, he said, ending the call before Theo could argue further. He opened his laptop and began composing emails to specific contacts, people whose services fell into murky ethical and legal territories. People who could help him ensure that even if his betrayers eventually walked free, they would find nothing of their previous lives remaining. Chapter 6. The Price of Blood. The trial date was set for March, 4 months away. In the interim, Nolan methodically reclaimed control of his life while setting the stage for his comprehensive retribution. His first target was Gregory Harding's empire. Through Wesley's connections in financial journalism, Nolan arranged for a thorough expose of Gregory's business practices to be published in the Wall Street Journal. The article detailed questionable land acquisitions, environmental violations, and testimonies from former employees about coercive practices. While none of these allegations alone would destroy Gregory, they created sufficient smoke to prompt multiple regulatory investigations. Within weeks, Gregory's investors began pulling out. Partners distanced themselves. The Harding name, once synonymous with prestige in Massachusetts real estate, became toxic. Pauline Harding confronted Nolan outside the courthouse after a preliminary hearing. You've destroyed my brother's reputation based on lies, she hissed. I've done nothing but ensure the truth reaches the public, Nolan replied calmly. The destruction is entirely self-inflicted. This vendetta won't bring you peace, Nolan. Peace was never my objective, Pauline. For Dominic Rafferty, Nolan's approach was more direct. Using his security firm's connections with military contractors, he ensured that every detail of Dominic's dishonorable discharge, information previously sealed, became widely available. The reason for that discharge, selling military equipment on the black market, was particularly damning. Additionally, Nolan anonymously funded the legal representation of 3 women who had previously attempted to press assault charges against Dominic. With proper resources and support, their cases gained traction, adding to the mounting legal troubles facing Veronica's accomplice. But it was for Veronica herself that Nolan reserved his most calculated response. Rather than attacking her directly, he systematically dismantled the world she hoped to return to if she ever escaped conviction. He sold their house, donating most of the furniture to veterans organizations. He dissolved their joint investments, using his half to establish a foundation supporting victims of domestic violence. He even adopted the cat she'd insisted on but rarely cared for, giving it to an elderly neighbor who showered it with affection. Most significantly, he gathered every photograph, letter, and memento from their 5 years together and held a ceremonial burning, inviting close friends to witness his symbolic rebirth. The event was covered by local media, positioning Nolan as a sympathetic figure taking healthy steps toward recovery, further isolating Veronica in public perception. "You're becoming obsessed," Theo warned over dinner 6 weeks into Nolan's campaign. "This isn't healing, it's festering." "I'm perfectly healthy," Nolan insisted, methodically cutting his steak. "I'm exercising daily, sleeping well, and my company is thriving. The government contract came through despite Gregory's attempts to sabotage it. That's not what I mean, and you know it." Theo leaned forward. "You're channeling every ounce of energy into destroying them. What happens when there's nothing left to destroy? Then I'll know it's finished. And then what? You build a life on the ashes of revenge." Nolan set down his utensils. "They stole 5 years from me, Theo. 5 years of building a life with someone who was plotting my death. What would you have me do? Forgive and forget? No, but there's a difference between justice and obsession. One heals, the other consumes." The conversation was interrupted by Nolan's phone. "Detective Mendez, Veronica's requesting a meeting," she said without preamble. "Says she has information you'd want to hear before the trial." "What kind of information?" "She wouldn't say. Insists on speaking with you directly. No attorneys present." Nolan considered this. "When?" "Tomorrow. Supervised visit at the detention center." After ending the call, he looked at Theo. "Veronica wants to meet." "It's a manipulation," Theo said immediately. "She knows the case against her is solid. She's looking for any angle to improve her situation. Precisely why I'm going. I want to see what she thinks she can use against me now." The following afternoon, Nolan sat across from Veronica in the detention center's visitation room. 3 months of incarceration had dulled her normally immaculate appearance. Her blonde hair lacked its usual luster, and without makeup, the fine lines around her eyes were more pronounced. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice softer than he remembered. "Detective Mendez said you have information for me. Always straight to business." A ghost of her former smile appeared. "That's what I initially found attractive about you. No games, no pretense. Unlike your approach to our entire relationship." She accepted the barb with a slight nod. "I deserve that. But what I have to tell you isn't about us. It's about Gregory. I'm familiar with your uncle's criminal enterprises. Not all of them." She leaned forward. The money laundering wasn't just about cleaning cash from real estate deals. He was moving funds for the Brennan family. The Brennans were notorious in Boston's organized crime hierarchy, deeply entrenched but slippery enough to avoid major convictions. Gregory kept records, she continued. Insurance, he called it. Names, dates, amounts. If something happens to him in prison. Stop. Nolan held up his hand. If this is an attempt to trade information for leniency, take it to the prosecutor. This isn't about leniency. It's about survival. Her composure cracked slightly. The Brennans know Gregory has documentation. They've already reached out through channels, making it clear nobody connected to him is safe. That includes me and you. Me? I've never had any connection to Gregory's operations. You think that matters to people like the Brennans? You're the one who exposed Gregory. In their world, that makes you responsible for any threat to their organization. Nolan studied her, searching for the manipulation. Why warn me? Because despite everything, I never wanted you dead, Nolan. That was Gregory's escalation and Dominic's eagerness. I just wanted. She trailed off. My money. My company's contracts. Everything but me. She didn't deny it. The records are in a safety deposit box at First Maritime Bank. Box 2317. Gregory gave me the key when I agreed to marry you. It's in a hollow bedpost in my mother's house. The guest room, left side of the headboard. Nolan stood. I'll pass this information to Detective Mendez. If it proves valuable, perhaps the prosecutor will consider it in your sentencing. As he turned to leave, Veronica called after him. Nolan, I am sorry, not for getting caught, but for becoming someone who could do this to another person. He paused at the door. Save the performance, Veronica. You weren't sorry during 5 years of deception. You weren't sorry when you discussed my murder over lunch. You're only sorry now because you failed. The information about the Brennan connection proved accurate. Within days, the FBI had incorporated the evidence from Gregory's safety deposit box into a larger RICO investigation against the crime family. Veronica's cooperation earned her no reduction in charges, but might influence her eventual sentencing. More importantly to Nolan, it provided the final piece in understanding the architecture of betrayal that had shaped the last 5 years of his life. Gregory hadn't just been a wealthy opportunist using his niece as a pawn. He'd been a money launderer for organized crime, making Nolan an unwitting adjacency to serious criminal operations. The knowledge crystallized his resolve. His campaign of retribution wasn't just justified. It was necessary, not just for his peace of mind, but to ensure that those who had conspired against him could never rebuild their lives to threaten him again. As the trial date approached, Nolan prepared to deliver the final blows in his methodically orchestrated revenge. The legal system would provide the framework, but Nolan would ensure the punishment extended far beyond whatever sentences the court imposed. Chapter 7. Ashes to Dust. The trial lasted 11 days. 11 days of evidence meticulously presented by the prosecution. 11 days of desperate countermeasures by the defense. 11 days of Nolan sitting stoically in the gallery, his expression never betraying the calculated satisfaction he felt watching Veronica, Dominic, and Gregory squirm under the weight of their exposed conspiracy. Sullivan Pierce, Veronica's high-priced attorney, attempted to paint her as another victim, manipulated by her uncle and coerced by Dominic. The strategy disintegrated when the prosecution played the basement recording where Veronica clearly instructed Dominic on how to ensure the gas leak would kill Nolan efficiently. On the final day, as the jury entered deliberations, Nolan met with Assistant District Attorney Frances Calloway in her office. The jury won't be out long, she predicted, organizing the trial materials into labeled boxes. The evidence is overwhelming. What are we looking at for sentencing? Nolan asked. Gregory's looking at 15 to 20 minimum for conspiracy to commit murder, plus the financial crimes and RICO charges. Dominic's prior record will push him toward the maximum, probably 25 years. She hesitated. Veronica's trickier. No prior record, and Pierce has built a somewhat convincing narrative of manipulation. Likely 10 to 15 years, with possibility of parole. After serving at least a third of her sentence, yes. Seeing Nolan's expression, she added, That's still a significant consequence, Mr. Voss. Many similar cases end with much lighter sentences. I understand the legal realities, he replied. I'm grateful for your thorough prosecution. After leaving the courthouse, Nolan drove to a secluded overlook where Wesley was waiting. They sat in silence, watching the sunset over the Boston skyline. Jury's deliberating, Nolan finally said. And you're not satisfied? Wesley observed. The legal system isn't designed for satisfaction. It's designed for procedure. Wesley studied his friend carefully. What are you planning, Nolan? Have you secured the documents I requested? With obvious reluctance, Wesley handed over a manila envelope. Everything's there, but I want it on record that I think this crosses a line. Noted. Nolan examined the contents, property records, financial statements, and contact information for several key individuals. What about the offshore arrangements? Set up as specified. Untraceable back to you. Good. And the Brennan situation? Wesley shifted uncomfortably. The FBI raid is scheduled for tomorrow morning, based on Gregory's evidence. Multiple locations simultaneously. If it goes as planned, most of their organization will be in custody by noon. And the information about Dominic's cooperation? Planted in the system yesterday. By now, it's reached the Brennan lieutenants still on the outside. Nolan nodded, satisfied. The pieces were aligning perfectly. One last thing. Did you speak with Pauline's mortgage holder? Yes. Once the trial concludes, They'll proceed with foreclosure regardless of any attempts to renegotiate. Thank you, Wesley. I know this isn't comfortable for you. You saved my business and my reputation when everyone else abandoned me, Wesley replied. I'll always have your back, Nolan. But this vendetta, it changes a person. Just make sure the man who comes out the other side is someone you can live with. The jury returned with their verdict the following morning. Guilty on all counts for all three defendants. As Nolan had predicted, Gregory received 18 years for conspiracy to commit murder plus additional time for the financial crimes. Dominic was sentenced to 22 years. Veronica received 12 years with possibility of parole after serving 4. While the courtroom emptied, Nolan remained seated, watching as the 3 people who had conspired to end his life were led away in handcuffs. Veronica looked back once, her expression unreadable. Nolan met her gaze steadily, allowing himself a single, slight nod. Acknowledgement, not forgiveness. Outside, reporters clamored for his statement. He delivered a carefully rehearsed response about gratitude for the justice system and his intention to move forward with his life. What he didn't mention was that his definition of moving forward included ensuring his betrayers had nothing to return to when if they ever regained their freedom. By that evening, the dominoes he'd arranged began to fall. News broke of the massive FBI operation against the Brennan crime family, with multiple arrests and seizures of property and assets. Buried in the coverage was a brief mention that authorities had been aided by information from Dominic Rafferty, currently beginning his prison sentence. Within the prison system, that information would be a death sentence. Dominic would spend his entire incarceration in protective custody, isolated, constantly watchful, never safe. The planted evidence wasn't even true, but it would accomplish Nolan's purpose regardless. For Gregory, the reckoning came in the form of financial annihilation. While he sat in his prison cell, the offshore companies holding much of his wealth experienced a series of security breaches. Accounts were emptied, transferred through a labyrinth of digital channels before eventually reaching environmental charities Gregory had actively fought against for years. Simultaneously, evidence of tax fraud appeared mysteriously in IRS databases, triggering automatic audits of all remaining Harding assets. By morning, federal liens will be placed on every property, business interest, and account bearing Gregory's name. As for Veronica, Nolan's approach was more personal. Using the legal authority granted to him as her husband before their divorce was finalized, he systematically unraveled her carefully constructed public image. Her social media accounts posted pre-scheduled confessions. Her email sent apology letters to friends and associates detailing her deceptions, and all her personal photos and videos were deleted from cloud storage, erasing her digital existence as thoroughly as she had attempted to erase his physical one. Additionally, he established a substantial trust fund for victims of attempted homicide, naming it after his mother. The foundation would provide support services, legal assistance, and transitional housing, all funded initially by the proceeds from selling the assets Veronica had hoped to claim after his death. The next morning, as Nolan prepared for a meeting with his company's board to discuss expansion plans, Detective Mendez called. "There's been an incident," she said, her voice professional but strained. "Dominic Rafferty was attacked in the prison yard this morning. He's in critical condition." "I thought he'd be in protective custody," Nolan replied, careful to keep his tone neutral. "He was scheduled for transfer. Someone leaked the transport details." She paused. "I'm calling because there are rumors about the attack being connected to information about him cooperating against the Brennans. Information that wasn't accurate, as I recall from our conversations." "That's right." Another pause. "These rumors, they appeared very suddenly in very specific channels." Nolan understood what she was really asking. "That's concerning. I hope the authorities find whoever was responsible for spreading misinformation." "Mr. Voss." "Nolan, I understand the desire for justice. More than most. But there are lines that, once crossed, change who we are. I appreciate your concern, Detective. Was there anything else?" The silence stretched for several seconds before she responded. "No, nothing else." As Nolan ended the call, he felt no triumph at the news of Dominic's attack, No satisfaction in Gregory's financial collapse. No pleasure in Veronica's social destruction. What he felt was the cool certainty that actions had consequences, that betrayal extracted its own unique price, and that he had been the instrument of that cosmic accounting. Chapter 8. Salt in the Earth. 6 months after the trial, Nolan's security firm had expanded to 3 additional cities. The government contract that Gregory and Veronica had coveted formed the foundation for a company now valued at over $70 million. Nolan had channeled his organizational skills and analytical mind into building something substantial from the ashes of his personal life. On the surface, he appeared to be moving forward admirably. He'd purchased a new home in a different neighborhood, established new routines, even begun casually dating again, though he maintained strict emotional boundaries that none of his companions had yet penetrated. Below that carefully constructed normalcy, however, Nolan continued monitoring the aftermath of his retribution with methodical precision. Weekly reports arrived in encrypted emails: Gregory's deteriorating health in prison, Veronica's failed appeal, Dominic's slow recovery from his injuries under constant guard, Pauline Harding's descent into financial ruin as the family wealth evaporated and creditors circled. Tara Lowell's struggle to find employment after her involvement in the conspiracy became public knowledge. He kept these updates in a secure digital folder labeled Closure, a reminder that justice was ongoing, not a single moment of verdict or sentencing. On a crisp autumn morning, Nolan met Theo for their now traditional Saturday breakfast. His brother had watched Nolan's transformation with increasing concern, but today he had news of his own. "I'm moving to Arizona," Theo announced after they'd ordered. Security contract with a tech company setting up facilities in Phoenix. 2-year minimum commitment. "That's a significant change," Nolan observed. "You've never mentioned interest in leaving Massachusetts." Theo studied him for a moment. "Sometimes distance provides perspective. I need that right now." "From what?" "From this." Theo gestured between them. "From watching my brother transform into someone I barely recognize. I'm the same person I've always been." No, the Nolan I knew understood the difference between justice and vengeance. He wouldn't have orchestrated Dominic Rafferty's prison yard accident. Nolan's expression remained neutral. "I had nothing to do with what happened to Rafferty. Maybe not directly, but we both know you created the circumstances." Theo leaned forward. "Gregory Harding's mysterious heart attack last month after his medication was accidentally switched? The foreclosure on Pauline's house despite her having made arrangements with the bank? The anonymous tips to Veronica's parole board every time she comes up for consideration? You seem very concerned about the welfare of people who conspired to murder me. I'm concerned about you. This obsession with monitoring their suffering, with ensuring it continues, it's consuming you. When does it end, Nolan? When are they punished enough?" The question hung between them as their food arrived. Nolan methodically arranged his silverware before responding. "I used to ask myself the same question, but I've realized something. There is no enough. No punishment equals 5 years of lies culminating in attempted murder. So it's not about achieving equivalence. It's about ensuring consequences are permanent. That's not justice. That's playing God. No, it's ensuring that actions have irreversible consequences, just like mine would have been if their plan had succeeded." Nolan's voice remained calm, reasonable. "I'm not actively harming them anymore, Theo. I'm simply ensuring they never recover what they lost." Theo pushed his plate away, appetite gone. "Do you hear yourself? You're talking about dedicating your life to making sure other people remain miserable. That's not healing. That's not moving forward. I've rebuilt my company. I've created new relationships. By any objective measure, I am moving forward. Externally, yes. But inside," Theo tapped his temple. "You're still living in that moment when you heard Veronica plotting your death. You haven't moved an inch from that day." The accusation struck closer to truth than Nolan wanted to admit. He changed tactics. "I appreciate your concern, but this is my life, my choice in how to process what happened. And that's why I'm leaving," Theo replied quietly. "I can't watch this version of you calcify into permanence." The brother I knew understood that holding on to hatred only poisons yourself. The brother you knew was naive enough to marry a woman who spent 5 years planning his murder. Theo stood, dropping cash on the table for his untouched meal. Call me when you're ready to actually heal, not just survive. I'll always be your brother, Nolan. But I can't be complicit in what you're becoming. After Theo left, Nolan sat alone, finishing his breakfast with the same methodical precision he applied to everything now. His brother's words echoed uncomfortably, challenging the narrative he'd constructed around his actions. Later that evening, he found himself parked outside the state correctional facility where Veronica was serving her sentence. He hadn't planned to come here, had actively avoided being anywhere near this place since the trial. Yet somehow, Theo's departure had triggered something unexpected, a need to confront the source of his transformation. He didn't go inside, didn't request a visit. Instead, he sat watching the imposing walls, trying to identify the emotion churning beneath his carefully maintained control. It wasn't satisfaction or vindication, not even anger anymore. It was something hollower, more persistent. His phone chimed with an incoming email, the weekly update on his betrayer's circumstances. Instead of opening it immediately as he usually did, he hesitated, Theo's words replaying in his mind. You're still living in that moment when you heard Veronica plotting your death. You haven't moved an inch from that day. With a deliberate movement, he moved the email to a folder without reading it. Then he started the car and drove away from the prison, with no destination in mind, but a growing certainty that something needed to change. Not his resolve regarding those who had betrayed him, that remained unaltered, but perhaps the space they occupied in his daily thoughts. The energy he dedicated to monitoring their suffering could be redirected toward something more constructive than mere surveillance of their downfall. As he drove through the night, Nolan began formulating a new approach, one that would cement his retribution while freeing him from the need to actively maintain it. A final reckoning that would allow him to truly move forward while ensuring they never could. Chapter 9. Salt the Earth. Winter descended on Boston with particular ferocity that year. 3 major snowstorms had paralyzed the city in December alone, creating a hushed landscape that mirrored Nolan's increasingly contemplative state. In the months since Theo's departure for Arizona, Nolan had methodically restructured his relationship with revenge. He'd stopped reading the weekly reports, instructing his investigators to continue monitoring, but to contact him only if something required his direct attention. He'd established automated systems to maintain the financial and legal pressures on the Harding family assets. And he'd finally filed for divorce, ending his legal connection to Veronica after nearly a year of deliberate delay. Today would mark the final phase of his recalibrated approach. As he buttoned his overcoat against the biting cold, Nolan reviewed his schedule for what he'd come to think of as his closure day. First stop, the attorney's office to sign the finalized divorce papers. Veronica had finally agreed to his terms, relinquishing all claims to any assets acquired during their marriage, accepting lifetime restraining orders, and acknowledging extensive financial penalties should she ever attempt to contact him or speak publicly about their relationship after her eventual release. She's getting nothing but her freedom when she's paroled, his attorney confirmed as Nolan signed the last document. And even that will be heavily restricted by these terms. Has she been notified of the finalization? The prison will deliver the paperwork today. His next appointment took him to the memorial garden he'd established in honor of other survivors of attempted homicide by intimate partners. The foundation he'd created now provided support services in 3 states, with plans to expand nationally. He walked the snow-covered paths, examining the simple stone monument at its center, inscribed with words that had become something of a personal mantra, from survival to revival. Midday found him at the headquarters of his security firm, where the board had gathered for a special announcement. Nolan stood before them, projecting the confidence that had become his trademark in business settings. Effective immediately, I'm stepping down as CEO, he announced, surprising everyone except Wesley, who had been briefed the previous evening. I'll maintain my position on the board, but will be transitioning to a new role as head of our nonprofit division, focusing on security solutions for vulnerable populations. The questions came rapidly. Why now? Who would replace him? Was this related to his personal trauma? Nolan addressed them with practiced calm, explaining that the company's successful expansion provided the perfect opportunity for new leadership while allowing him to channel his expertise into meaningful social impact. What he didn't share was the private recognition that had prompted this decision, that his obsession with monitoring his betrayer's suffering had begun to mirror their fixation on destroying him. That symmetry troubled him in ways he couldn't fully articulate but knew he needed to break. His final stop for the day brought him back to the state correctional facility, this time with purpose. He had arranged a supervised meeting with Veronica, their first since the brief encounter before the trial, over a year ago. She entered the visitation room with visible surprise. The prison environment had continued its transformation of her appearance. Thinner, paler, her once meticulous grooming simplified by institutional limitations. Yet she carried herself with the same poised calculation he recognized from their marriage. "I didn't expect to see you again," she said as she sat across from him. "Today seemed appropriate. The divorce is finalized." She nodded. "So I've been informed. You've stripped away everything." "Not everything. You still have your life, which is more than you planned to leave me. Is that why you're here? One final opportunity to underscore your victory." Nolan studied her, searching for any hint of genuine remorse. Finding none, he proceeded with his prepared statement. "I'm here to inform you personally that I've established certain permanent arrangements. First, I've created a trust that will systematically challenge any parole application you file. The trust has sufficient funding to continue this process for 50 years. Her expression tightened, vindictive to the end. "Second, I've transferred the majority of my assets to foundations and secured holding companies that can never be accessed by you or any Harding family member, regardless of legal maneuvering. What happened to Gregory's fortune will pale compared to the financial firewall I've constructed." "You've made your point, Nolan. You've won. This isn't about winning." He leaned forward slightly. "It's about ensuring that the consequences of your actions extend beyond whatever sentence the court imposed. You, Gregory, and Dominic attempted to take everything from me. You failed. Now you live with the reality that everything has been taken from you instead, permanently, irrevocably. And this gives you satisfaction?" Her voice carried a hint of the manipulative charm that had once clouded his judgment. "Satisfaction isn't relevant. This is simply completion." He stood, gathering his coat. "I won't be monitoring your situation anymore, Veronica. I won't be checking on your appeals or your prison conditions. I've established systems that will maintain these consequences automatically without requiring my attention or energy." "So you're finally moving on?" There was something almost like relief in her tone. "No." His voice was quiet but absolute. "I've already moved on. This is merely confirming that you never will." As he turned to leave, she called after him. "You know, you became exactly what Gregory said you would eventually reveal yourself to be: cold, calculating, ruthless. Maybe we weren't so different after all." Nolan paused at the door. "The difference is that I never would have conspired to murder someone for financial gain. Whatever I've become was forged in the fire you created." Outside, snow was falling again, softening the harsh lines of the prison complex. Nolan stood for a moment, breathing in the crisp winter air, feeling a subtle shift within himself. Not freedom from the past, but perhaps a recalibration of its weight. His phone rang. Theo, calling from Arizona. "I heard about the changes at the company," his brother said when Nolan answered. "Wesley mentioned you're moving into nonprofit work. It seemed time for a change in focus." "And the other situation? The monitoring, the reports?" Nolan watched the snowflakes swirling in the wind. "Ended. Not the consequences. Those remain permanent. But my active involvement in maintaining them." Theo was silent for a moment. "That's a start. It's more than that. It's a recognition that revenge can become its own prison. Coming from you, that's practically philosophical enlightenment," Theo said, a hint of their old connection warming his voice. "Don't mistake me," Nolan cautioned. "I haven't forgiven them. I never will. But I've established systems that ensure they face permanent consequences without requiring my ongoing attention. I'm reallocating my energy, not abandoning my principles." Still, Theo hesitated. Its movement in a healthier direction. As they continued talking, Nolan walked to his car, brushing snow from the windshield. In the distance, he could see the lights of Boston glimmering through the winter haze, the city where he'd built his life, lost it, and now was reconstructing something different in its place. What emerged from the ashes of betrayal wasn't the man he'd been before. That person had died the moment he heard Veronica plotting with Dominic. But neither was it the coldly obsessive avenger he'd temporarily become. This version of Nolan Voss carried the hard-earned wisdom that trust must be allocated as carefully as capital, that justice required active maintenance, and that moving forward didn't necessitate forgetting. He had salted the earth of his betrayers' futures, ensuring nothing would ever grow from the ruins of their conspiracy. Now, having secured that permanent desolation, he could turn his attention to cultivating his own new landscape, one built with the protective fortifications his experience had taught him were essential, but not defined solely by their presence. The snow continued falling as he drove away from the prison for the final time, leaving behind both Veronica and the version of himself that had existed primarily as a response to her betrayal. What lay ahead remained uncharted, but for the first time since that afternoon on his couch, pretending to nap while hearing his murder being planned, Nolan felt something approaching genuine curiosity about what his future might hold. Not forgiveness, never that, but perhaps, eventually, something resembling peace, built not on the foundation of forgetting, but on the certainty that justice, once established, would maintain itself without consuming the one who had secured it. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Turbulence Before Takeoff. Jeremy Long checked his watch as he settled into seat 14C. The red-eye from Chicago to Seattle was supposed to be routine. 6 hours to decompress after 3 exhausting days consulting for Meridian Financial. His laptop bag contained the usual cargo: encrypted drives, security reports, and a half-eaten protein bar he'd bought 2 airports ago. At 34, Jeremy had built his reputation as one of the best independent cybersecurity specialists in the Midwest. Companies paid premium rates for his discretion and his uncanny ability to find vulnerabilities in systems everyone else declared secure. This week's job had been straightforward: penetration testing for Meridian's new blockchain platform. Nothing unusual, except for a nagging feeling he couldn't shake. That morning, he'd found an anomaly in Meridian's transaction logs. A ghost wallet moving millions through their system, the digital breadcrumbs disappearing into offshore accounts. He'd documented everything, backed it up to his encrypted drive, and planned to deliver his findings to the CEO on Monday. Standard protocol. "Sir, can I get you anything before takeoff?" Jeremy looked up at the flight attendant. Tall, late 20s, with alert brown eyes that seemed to assess him in a single glance. Her name tag read Natasha O'Reilly. "Just water, thanks." She nodded and moved down the aisle. Jeremy pulled out his phone for one last message to his wife, Alexandra. They'd been married 18 months, a whirlwind romance that started at a technology conference in San Francisco. She'd been representing a startup accelerator. He'd been the keynote speaker on corporate espionage. They'd clicked immediately, landing at 11 p.m. "Don't wait up. Love you, Jay." Her response came seconds later. "Safe flight, baby. Can't wait to see you." Hey. The cabin lights dimmed. Jeremy closed his eyes, ready for the familiar discomfort of takeoff. That's when he felt something press into his hand. His eyes snapped open. Natasha Riley was leaning over him, her face composed, but her hand trembling as she placed a folded napkin in his palm. Before he could speak, she moved to the next row. Jeremy unfolded the napkin, his pulse quickening. "My flight attendant slipped me a note. Pretend you're sick. Get off this plane. Gate C7. Run." The handwriting was urgent, almost frantic. Jeremy's mind raced through possibilities. Bomb threat, mechanical failure, terror plot. He glanced around the cabin. Normal pre-flight bustle. Businessmen checking emails. Families settling children. Nothing suspicious. He caught Natasha's eye as she passed again. She mouthed a single word, "Please." The raw fear in her expression made his decision. Jeremy had survived his career by trusting his instincts, and every alarm in his head was screaming. He pressed the call button. Natasha appeared instantly. "Yes, sir. I need to get off." Jeremy grimaced, clutching his stomach. "I think that airport sushi was a mistake. I'm going to be sick." Her relief was visible for just a microsecond. "Of course. Let me inform the captain." 5 minutes later, Jeremy stood in the jetway with a gate agent, his luggage being retrieved from the cargo hold. Through the terminal window, he watched Flight 447 push back from Gate C7. The Boeing 737 taxied toward the runway, navigation lights blinking in the darkness. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Gate C7. Third floor observation deck. Come alone. NR. Jeremy shouldered his laptop bag and headed for the escalator. Behind him, Flight 447 lifted into the night sky, banking west toward Seattle. He watched it disappear into the clouds, then continued upward. The observation deck was empty at this hour. Natasha Riley stood by the windows, still in her uniform, her hands shaking as she lit a cigarette. "You're not really a flight attendant," Jeremy said quietly. "Federal Air Marshal. Undercover for 8 months." She took a long drag. "That plane is going to explode 30 minutes into the flight. Bomb in the cargo hold, disguised as lithium batteries." Jeremy's blood turned to ice. "How do you?" "Because I've been tracking Craig Dotson for 2 years, and he just put you on a plane rigged to blow." She turned to face him, her eyes hard. "You found something, didn't you? Something at Meridian Financial. The ghost wallet." Jeremy's mind connected the dots with sickening clarity. Dodson's running the smuggling operation through their blockchain. Not just smuggling. Arms deals, trafficking, money laundering, 300 million in illegal transactions over 18 months. Natasha's jaw clenched. He's got people everywhere. FBI, TSA, corporate boards. When you flagged those transactions, he decided you were too dangerous to live. There were 160 people on that plane. Collateral damage. Dotson doesn't care. She pulled out a burner phone. "I got intel 3 hours ago. Couldn't get the bomb squad involved without tipping off his contacts. All I could do was get you off." Jeremy stared at her. "Why me specifically?" "Because you're the only one who can stop him. You have the evidence." And she hesitated. "Your wife isn't who you think she is." Before Jeremy could respond, Natasha's phone lit up with an alert. Then his phone. Then every device in the terminal seemed to buzz simultaneously. Breaking news. Flight 447 experiencing catastrophic mechanical failure. Through the observation window, Jeremy saw it. A distant orange bloom in the night sky. Then nothing. His knees buckled. He grabbed the railing, his entire body going numb. 160 people. Families. Children. Gone in an instant because he'd stumbled onto the wrong string of code. Natasha caught his arm. "We don't have time to process this. Dotson will know you survived within the hour. We need to move." "Alexandra." Jeremy's voice cracked. "Your wife has been reporting your activities to Dotson since the day you met. She's the one who confirmed you'd be on that flight." Natasha's tone softened slightly. "I'm sorry, but if you want justice for those people, if you want to survive the next 24 hours, you need to listen to everything I'm about to tell you." Jeremy straightened, forcing his mind into focus. The grief would come later. Right now, he needed to become what his military father had trained him to be, a survivor who thought 3 steps ahead. "Tell me everything," he said, his voice steady despite the fury building in his chest. "Every single thing about Craig Dotson." Chapter 2. The Disappeared. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in Evanston, 40 minutes from O'Hare. Natasha had driven them there in silence, while Jeremy processed the impossible reality of his life imploding. His phone buzzed constantly. Alexander calling, texting, probably panicking over the news coverage. He turned it off after the 15th call. First rule, Natasha said, deadbolting the door. Craig Dodson has surveillance everywhere. Cameras, informants, hacked systems. We assume he can find us within 48 hours no matter what we do. Jeremy set up his laptop on the kitchen table, pulling out his encrypted drives. Then we use those 48 hours. Tell me everything. Natasha poured 2 cups of black coffee and sat across from him. In the harsh kitchen light, she looked exhausted. Craig Dodson, 52. On paper, he's a legitimate businessman, CEO of Apex International Solutions, a logistics and consulting firm. In reality, he's running the largest criminal enterprise in the Midwest. Weapons trafficking to South America and Africa, art theft, money laundering, human trafficking. The FBI's had a task force on him for 3 years with nothing to show for it. Because he owns people inside the bureau, Jeremy said flatly. At least 2 agents we know of. Probably more. She pulled out a tablet, showing him files. Photos of Dodson, silver-haired, distinguished, the kind of man who belonged at country clubs and charity galas. He's untouchable because he's careful. Every transaction goes through shell corporations and crypto wallets. He never gets his hands dirty. And anyone who gets close ends up like Flight 447. Jeremy studied the files, his analyst brain cataloging information. You said Alexandra has been working for him. How deep does that go? Natasha hesitated. Her real name is Carrie Lucas. She's been his inside operator for 5 years. Before you, she was married to a prosecutor in Miami who was investigating Dodson's Florida connections. The prosecutor died in a boating accident. Before that, she dated an IRS investigator who had a fatal heart attack at 36. She met his eyes. I'm sorry. I know this isn't easy. Jeremy's hands clenched. 18 months of marriage. Shared dreams, intimate moments, planning for a future. All of a lie. The woman he'd fallen in love with didn't exist. She was an assassin in designer clothes, and he'd been too blind to see it. What's Dodson's endgame? He asked, shoving the pain down. If he wanted me dead, the plan accomplished that. Why is Alexandra still maintaining cover? Because of this. Natasha pulled up a video file. This is from 3 days ago. Your wife, sorry, Carrie, meeting with Dodson at a restaurant in Naperville. Jeremy watched the grainy surveillance footage. Alexandra, no, Carrie, sitting across from Craig Dodson. Their body language was intimate, familiar. His hand covered hers. They looked like lovers, not employer and employee. They've been together for 7 years, Natasha said quietly. Romantically involved the whole time. You weren't just a mark, Jeremy. You were a threat she was neutralizing while playing house. The coffee tasted like ash. Jeremy closed the video, his mind working through the implications. She'll know I'm alive soon. The passenger manifest will show I deplaned. What happens then? She'll try to make contact. Play the worried wife. Dodson will assign a cleanup crew to eliminate you before you can expose anything. Natasha stood, pacing. I've been building a case for 2 years, but it's not enough. Digital trails that could be explained away, circumstantial evidence, testimony from criminals who'd never testify against Dodson. What I need is something ironclad, something that ties him directly to major crimes. Jeremy felt a cold smile forming. What about 300 million in illegal transactions flowing through a Fortune 500 company's blockchain? Transactions I can prove originated from Dodson's ghost wallet. Natasha stopped pacing. You can prove that. I can prove all of it. Jeremy opened his encrypted drive, pulling up files. Meridian Financial's blockchain platform launched 18 months ago. They marketed it as unhackable, completely transparent. What they didn't know was that their head of technology, Roy Daniels, is on Dodson's payroll. He built a backdoor into the system. He pulled up schematics, transaction logs, wallet addresses. Dodson's been using Meridian as a washing machine. Dirty money goes in through hundreds of small transactions, gets mixed with legitimate business, comes out clean on the other end. I found a pattern 3 days ago. Every transaction links back to a master wallet controlled by someone with Daniel's access codes. Can you trace it to Dodson directly? Natasha leaned over his shoulder, studying the data. Not yet, but I can prove the system is compromised. And if we can get Daniels to flip. He won't flip. Dodson owns him completely. Natasha bit her lip, thinking, but if we can expose the system, force a federal investigation, that puts pressure on all of Dodson's operations. He'd have to scramble, maybe make mistakes. Jeremy nodded slowly. There's more. I was digging through Meridian's employee records, cross-referencing with the transaction patterns. I found 5 other people in the company who have irregular system access. People who should be in marketing or HR, but who are touching the blockchain. If Dodson has that many people inside one company, then he has them everywhere. Natasha sat back, down heavily. We're not just taking down a criminal. We're dismantling a network. They worked through the night. Jeremy mapped out Dodson's operation using his data, while Natasha cross-referenced it with her FBI intelligence. By dawn, they had a picture. Dodson controlled legitimate businesses across 7 states, each one a front for different criminal operations. Shipping companies moved weapons and contraband. Tech firms laundered money. Real estate holdings hid trafficking operations. And everywhere, there were people like Carrie Lucas. Beautiful, intelligent, deadly. Embedded in positions of influence, gathering intelligence, eliminating threats. We need allies, Jeremy said, rubbing his eyes. People Dodson doesn't own. I have a handler, John Donahue, special agent in charge of the Chicago field office. He's clean. I'd stake my life on it. Natasha checked her watch. But we can't just walk into the FBI. Too risky. We need to be smart about this. Jeremy's phone, still powered off, sat on the table like a live grenade. Eventually, they'd have to deal with it. With Alexandra. With the life he thought he'd built. What's your plan? Natasha asked. Jeremy looked at her, then at the screens full of data. At the evidence that could bring down Craig Dodson. At the opportunity for justice for 160 innocent people who died because of him. We make Dodson think I'm dead, he said slowly. We stage my death, go underground, and build a case so airtight that even his corrupted agents can't touch it. Then we expose everything publicly. Force his hand. That's not enough, Natasha said quietly. A man like Dodson? He'll lawyer up, destroy evidence, kill witnesses. Even with everything we have, he might walk. Jeremy met her eyes. His father's words echoed in his mind. Sometimes the system fails. Sometimes justice requires a different approach. Then we make sure he doesn't walk, Jeremy said. Whatever it takes. Chapter 3. The Ghost Protocol. 48 hours after Flight 447 fell from the sky, Jeremy Long was officially declared dead. The passenger manifest, the recovered wreckage, the forensic reports, all confirmed that he'd been aboard when the plane exploded. The investigation cited catastrophic mechanical failure. The lithium battery shipment was never mentioned. Standing in John Donahue's private office, Jeremy watched the news coverage of his own memorial service. Alexandra played the grieving widow perfectly. Black dress, tasteful tears, a trembling statement about the love of her life. She'd even brought his mother, Patricia, who looked genuinely devastated. That's cold, Donahue muttered. The FBI agent was 58, with iron gray hair and the weathered face of someone who'd seen too much. Using your own mother as a prop. Jeremy's jaw clenched. Getting his mother to safety had been his first move. A quiet extraction, a story about witness protection, a secure location where Dodson's people couldn't reach her. She thought he was investigating corporate fraud. She didn't know her daughter-in-law was an assassin. Carrie Lucas has been busy, Natasha said, scrolling through surveillance reports. Cleaned out your apartment, accessed your cloud storage, copied every file. She's looking for the encrypted drives. Let her look. Jeremy turned from the television. Everything she finds will be sanitized. The real data is here. He tapped his laptop. Donahue studied the young man before him. Jeremy Long looked different after 48 hours. Harder, colder, purpose replacing grief. The agent had seen it before. The moment someone stopped being a victim and became something else entirely. Walk me through what you found, Donahue said. For the next 2 hours, Jeremy laid out the evidence. The Meridian blockchain scheme. The ghost wallet. The network of corrupted employees. Natasha supplemented with her intelligence, surveillance photos, wire transfers, communications intercepts. It's impressive, Donahue admitted, but it's not prosecutable. Not yet. Any defense attorney could claim the blockchain was hacked by outside actors. We need something that proves Dodson's direct involvement. Roy Daniels, Jeremy said. He's the keystone. He built the backdoor. He manages the transactions. Get him to flip, and the whole thing unravels. Daniels won't flip, Natasha repeated. Dodson owns him too completely. Everyone has a pressure point. Jeremy pulled up a file. Roy Daniels, 46, divorced, one daughter. Agnes Daniels, 19, sophomore at Northwestern. Full scholarship. Daniels sends her money every month. But here's what's interesting. The money doesn't come from his Meridian salary. It comes from offshore accounts tied to Dodson's network. Donahue leaned forward. You're suggesting Daniels is stealing from Dodson to support his daughter? I'm suggesting Dodson knows about it and doesn't care. Because as long as Daniels is embezzling, Dodson has leverage. Jeremy's expression was grim. But what if we could offer Daniels something better? Full immunity, witness protection for him and his daughter, and we bury the embezzlement. In exchange, he testifies. That's a fantasy, Natasha objected. Dodson would kill him before he could testify. Not if we move fast. Jeremy stood, pacing now. We approach Daniels this week. Show him the evidence. Make him understand that Dodson's operation is collapsing and he can either go down with it or save himself and his daughter. He's a father. He'll choose her. Donahue considered it. It's risky. If Daniels warns Dodson, then we lose. Jeremy shrugged. But we're already playing from behind. Dodson thinks I'm dead, which gives us maybe a week before he moves his money and disappears. We need to act now. The agent studied him. You've thought about this a lot. I've thought about nothing else. Jeremy's voice was quiet but intense. 160 people died because I uncovered his operation. My wife, the woman I loved, was an assassin sent to monitor me. Everything I built was a lie. So yes, I've thought about how to make Craig Dodson pay. Every single minute. Natasha and Donahue exchanged glances. There was something dangerous in Jeremy's tone. Something that went beyond justice into darker territory. We do this by the book, Donahue said firmly. No vigilante justice, no revenge fantasies. We build a case, we get convictions, we let the system work. Jeremy nodded, but his eyes told a different story. The system had already failed 160 times. Approaching Roy Daniels required careful planning. The man was paranoid, as anyone in Dodson's orbit had to be. He varied his routes home, never used the same coffee shop twice, and his apartment had top-tier security. But he also visited his daughter every Sunday. Northwestern's campus was public, open, and under the watchful eyes of university police. A safe zone where Daniels could let his guard down. Jeremy watched from a coffee shop across from the library as Roy Daniels hugged his daughter goodbye. Agnes was tall, athletic, with her father's serious eyes. She said something that made him laugh, then headed toward her dorm. Daniel stood watching until she disappeared, then turned toward the parking structure. Jeremy intercepted him at the elevator. Roy Daniels. He kept his voice neutral. My name is Jeremy Long. We need to talk about Craig Dodson. Daniels went pale. His hand moved toward his phone, but Jeremy held up his own phone, showing him a photo. Daniels at a restaurant with Dodson, exchanging an envelope. I'm not a threat to you, Jeremy said quickly. I'm a cybersecurity consultant who flagged the Meridian transactions. I'm supposed to be dead, but I'm not. And right now, you have one chance to save yourself and your daughter. The elevator arrived. Daniels looked around frantically, then stepped inside. Jeremy followed, hitting the button for the top floor. Flight 447, Daniels whispered. That was supposed to kill you. It killed 160 other people instead. Jeremy's tone was hard. Because you built the system Dodson uses to fund his operations. You're complicit in mass murder, Roy. I didn't know, Danielle's voice cracked. I swear I didn't know he'd go that far. But you knew what the blockchain was for. You knew you were helping him launder money. You knew people were dying because of the weapons and drugs moving through his network. Jeremy moved closer. And you knew that if Dodson ever decided you were a liability, you'd end up like me. Or worse, he'd go after Agnes. Daniels leaned against the elevator wall, all the fight draining from him. What do you want? The FBI is building a case. I have evidence that could bring down Dodson's entire operation. But I need someone inside who can testify to the blockchain system, who can prove Dodson's direct involvement. That's you. Jeremy pulled out a card with Donahue's contact information. In exchange, you get full immunity and witness protection for you and your daughter. Clean slate. He'll kill me, Daniels said flatly. The moment I testify, I'm a dead man. He's going to kill you anyway, Jeremy said quietly. I found the embezzlement, Roy. The offshore accounts you've been pulling from to support Agnes. How long do you think it takes before Dodson notices? A month? A year? And when he does, what happens to your daughter? Danielle's hands were shaking. I wanted out. Years ago, I wanted out. But there's no exit with him. You work for Dodson. You work forever. There's an exit now. Jeremy pressed the card into his hand. Call that number. Talk to Special Agent Donahue. Or wait for Dodson to make his move and spend the rest of your short life knowing you chose wrong. The elevator reached the top floor. Jeremy stepped out, leaving Daniels alone with his choice. 3 days later, Roy Daniels walked into the FBI's Chicago field office and spent 12 hours detailing everything he knew about Craig Dodson's operation. The testimony was devastating. Not only did he confirm the blockchain scheme, but he provided evidence of dozens of other crimes, communications, transactions, meetings where Dodson personally ordered illegal activities. This is it, Donahue said, reviewing the transcripts. This is enough for indictments. Multiple federal charges. We can bring him down. But Jeremy was staring at a surveillance report, his expression troubled. Where's Carrie Lucas? Natasha, check her files. Last known location was your old apartment. After that, she disappeared. No credit card usage, no cell phone activity, no vehicle registration. She knows, Jeremy said quietly. Somehow, she knows we're making a move. And if she knows, Dodson knows. As if on cue, Donahue's phone rang. The agent listened for 30 seconds, his face going grim. He hung up. Danielle's daughter, he said. Agnes. She didn't show up for class this morning. Campus security found her dorm room empty. No signs of struggle, but all her things are there. Jeremy felt ice in his veins. He took her. Dodson's sending a message, Natasha said. Testify and your daughter dies. We need to find her. Now. Jeremy was already on his feet. Pulled traffic cameras, cell phone records, credit cards. We're on it, Donahue assured him. But Jeremy, this changes things. If Dodson has Agnes, he has leverage. Daniels might recant his testimony. Then we find her before he does. Jeremy grabbed his laptop. Dodson has safe houses, storage facilities, properties all over the region. Natasha, you have locations? She pulled up a map. 17 properties in Illinois, 9 in Indiana, 6 in Wisconsin. All under shell corporations, but I've tracked them back to him. The question is which one he'd use for a hostage. Jeremy studied the map, his mind working through logistics. Not the properties near major cities, too much risk of witnesses. Not the ones used for business operations. He wouldn't mix operations. And not anywhere connected to the weapons trafficking. He needs plausible deniability if this goes wrong. His finger landed on a location. Here, Pine Lake, Wisconsin. A hunting lodge owned by one of his shell corps. Remote, defensible, but not so isolated that it draws attention. If I were hiding a hostage, that's where I'd go. That's a 90-minute drive, Natasha said. We need tactical support, warrants. We don't have time for warrants. Jeremy looked at Donahue. Sir, if Agnes Daniels dies, we lose our star witness and Dodson walks. You know I'm right. Donahue closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. Natasha, assemble a tactical team. We move in 1 hour. This is a rescue operation, fully authorized. He looked at Jeremy. You're staying here. You're a civilian, and officially, you're dead. If you're seen, I'm the one who made Daniels testify, Jeremy interrupted. If Agnes dies because I pushed her father to cooperate, that's on me. I'm coming. For a long moment, the three of them stood in silence. Then Donahue sighed. Kevlar vest, stay behind the tactical team. And if shooting starts, you hit the ground. Clear. Jeremy nodded. Clear. As they prepared to move, he caught Natasha's eye. She looked worried. What is it? He asked quietly. This feels like a trap, she said. Like Dodson wants us to come for her. Jeremy had the same feeling. But what choice did they have? They'd already committed to the play. Now they had to see it through. Then we'll be ready, he said, checking the weapon Donahue had reluctantly provided. Whatever he's planning, we'll be ready. Chapter 4. Into the Wolves' Den. The Pine Lake Hunting Lodge sat at the end of a winding gravel road, surrounded by dense Wisconsin forest. FBI tactical vans parked a mile away, teams assembling in the pre-dawn darkness. Thermal imaging showed heat signatures inside the lodge. 3 people, maybe 4. Jeremy studied the tactical layout on Donahue's tablet. The lodge was 2 stories, stone and timber construction, with a clear kill zone around the perimeter. Anyone approaching would be visible for 50 yards. Classic defensive setup. We're going in quiet, the tactical commander briefed. 2 teams, north and south entrances. Flashbangs first, then breach. Rules of engagement, suspect armed and dangerous, but we need them alive if possible. The hostage is priority 1. Natasha checked her weapon, glancing at Jeremy. You stay with Donahue. He goes in after the initial breach. I know the plan, Jeremy said. His heart was pounding, but his hands were steady. The Kevlar vest was heavy, unfamiliar. He'd never been in a firefight before. His expertise was digital, not physical. But he'd trained for this in a way. His father, Edwin Long, had been Army Special Forces. Growing up, Jeremy had learned tactical thinking, threat assessment, how to stay calm under pressure. Those lessons had made him good at cybersecurity. Now, they might keep him alive. The teams moved out, shadows in the forest. Jeremy followed with Donahue in a reserve unit, watching the lodge through night vision. The heat signatures hadn't moved. Were they asleep? Waiting? The answer came 60 seconds later. Contact. North side. Gunfire erupted from the lodge. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness. The tactical team dove for cover as bullets tore through the trees. They knew we were coming. Natasha's voice crackled over the radio. It's an ambush. More gunfire from the south side. Jeremy and Donahue hit the ground as rounds impacted nearby trees. The reserve unit returned fire, laying down suppression. Thermal shows 4 hostiles. Second floor, someone shouted. No sign of the hostage. Jeremy's mind raced. 4 hostiles, prepared positions, no hostage. This wasn't a rescue. This was exactly what Natasha had feared. A trap. Pull back. Donahue ordered into his radio. Fall back to secondary positions. But before the teams could disengage, an explosion rocked the forest. The Southern Tactical van erupted in flames, ammunition cooking off in a chain reaction of detonations. IED. They mined the approach. More explosions. The road behind them disintegrated in a cascade of fire and shrapnel. They were cut off, pinned down, with hostile fire from the lodge and their escape route destroyed. Jeremy's training took over. He assessed the situation clinically. They were in a kill box. Dodson's people had prepared this perfectly. Lure them in with the hostage, mine the escape routes, set up elevated firing positions. Classic ambush tactics. The hostage isn't here, he said to Donahue. This whole thing is misdirection. The agent's face was grim. Then where is she? Before Jeremy could answer, his burner phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered, keeping low as bullets snapped overhead. Hello, Jeremy. Craig Dodson's voice was smooth, cultured. I hear you've had quite the week. Death, resurrection, federal investigation. Very dramatic. Jeremy's blood ran cold. Where's Agnes Daniels? Safe. For now. Whether she stays that way depends on you. Dodson sounded almost amused. I have to say, I'm impressed. Faking your death, turning my own IT manager against me, building a case with the FBI. You're more resourceful than I anticipated. I'm going to destroy you, Jeremy said flatly. No, you're going to back off. Because if you don't, Agnes dies. Roy Daniels recants his testimony and disappears. And everyone in that force with you right now dies as well. Dodson paused. I have snipers on the ridgeline. 20 well-trained men with Barrett rifles. They can kill every FBI agent there before you even see them. But I'd rather not create that kind of mess. What do you want? Simple. You and federal agent Natasha Riley surrender yourselves. Come to the lodge unarmed. While I'm satisfied you're no longer a threat, I'll release Agnes and your people can leave. Everyone lives. Very civilized. Jeremy looked at Donahue, who was listening on a second phone. The agent shook his head firmly. No deal. But Jeremy was already thinking 3 steps ahead. Dodson wanted them inside. That meant something in the lodge was important. Evidence, maybe, or a way to eliminate them permanently while maintaining deniability. How do I know you'll release Agnes? Jeremy asked. You don't, but you know I'll kill her if you refuse. And you know I'll kill every federal agent in that force just to make my point. So really, what choice do you have? The gunfire from the lodge had stopped. Eerie silence filled the forest. Jeremy could hear wounded agents calling for medics, could smell smoke from the burning van. I need proof Agnes is alive, he said. 5 seconds later, his phone received a video. Agnes Daniels, bound and gagged in a dark room. Today's newspaper visible beside her. Alive, terrified but unharmed. Clock's ticking, Jeremy. 5 minutes or the girl dies. And trust me, you'll hear her screaming from where you are. The call ended. Donahue grabbed his arm. You're not going in there. It's suicide. He's going to kill Agnes, Jeremy said. And everyone here. We're outgunned and outmaneuvered. We can call for backup. There's no time. Jeremy checked his weapon, making sure the safety was off. But he made a mistake. He wants us inside, which means there's something in that lodge he needs to protect. Something we can use. Natasha crawled over, blood streaming from a cut on her forehead. I heard. If we go in, we're dead. If we don't, everyone's dead. Jeremy looked at both of them. I need you to trust me. I have a plan. What plan? Donahue demanded. Jeremy's mind was working through possibilities, calculating angles. He thought about the lodge layout, the heat signatures, Dodson's psychological profile. A man that arrogant, that confident. He'd want to gloat. Want to watch them die. Dodson thinks he's won because he controls the battlefield, Jeremy said. But he's forgotten something. I'm not a soldier or an agent. I'm a systems analyst. And every system has a vulnerability. He pulled out his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. That lodge has a smart security system, cameras, alarms, electronic locks, all connected to a central network. And Roy Daniels built it, which means I can guess his passwords. 30 seconds of frantic typing. Then Jeremy smiled grimly. I'm in. I control every electronic system in that building. Lights, locks, cameras, everything. Natasha's eyes widened. You can cut their power? Better. I can trap them inside, lock them in rooms, and guide you through the building safely. Jeremy looked at Donahue. But I need to be inside to make it work. The Wi-Fi signal isn't strong enough out here. Then we all go, Donahue decided. Tactical teams stay back, secure the perimeter. Jeremy, Natasha, and I go in. We surrender, get close enough for Jeremy to work his magic. Then we flip the situation. It's risky, Natasha said. Everything about this is risky. Donahue checked his watch. 3 minutes left. We either commit or we run. Your call, Jeremy. This is your plan. Jeremy thought about Agnes Daniels. About Roy Daniels, who'd trusted him. About 160 people who died on Flight 447. About every life Dodson had destroyed. We go in, he said, and we end this. Chapter 5. The Devil's Own House. Jeremy, Natasha, and Donahue walked toward the lodge with their hands raised, weapons left behind. Floodlights illuminated them as they crossed the kill zone. Jeremy's heart hammered, every instinct screaming that this was wrong. But he kept his face neutral, his laptop bag slung over his shoulder. The front door opened. A man stepped out, mid-30s, military bearing, holding an AR-15. Not Craig Dodson, one of his hired guns. Inside, slowly, they entered a grand room with vaulted ceilings and a massive stone fireplace. Expensive furniture, hunting trophies on the walls, the kind of place wealthy men used to pretend they were outdoorsmen. 6 more armed men occupied strategic positions. And sitting in a leather chair by the fireplace, looking perfectly comfortable, was Craig Dodson. In person, he was exactly as his photos suggested. Distinguished, well-dressed, with cold eyes that missed nothing. He studied Jeremy like a scientist examining an interesting specimen. Jeremy Long, the man who won't die. Please sit. He gestured to a couch. Agent Riley, Special Agent Donahue. This is quite the collection of thorns at my side. Where's Agnes? Jeremy demanded. She's safe. In one of my other properties. Alive, unharmed, and will stay that way if you cooperate. Dodson poured himself a whiskey. I wanted to meet you face to face. To understand how a simple cybersecurity consultant caused me so much trouble. You killed 160 people because of me, Jeremy said flatly. I'd call that extreme. Necessary. You found my blockchain operation. You had evidence that could have exposed years of work. I eliminated a threat. Dodson shrugged. Collateral damage is unfortunate, but acceptable when the stakes are high enough. Jeremy felt rage building, but forced it down. He needed Dodson talking, distracted. His laptop was in the bag at his feet. If he could just access it. What happens now? Natasha asked. Now, I offer you a choice. The FBI's case against me collapses without Danielle's testimony. If he recants, and he will, to save his daughter, all you have is circumstantial evidence. Not enough to prosecute. Dodson sipped his drink. So, I'm offering you a deal. Walk away. All three of you. Forget about me. Forget about Daniels. Forget about everything. In exchange, I let Agnes go free, and we all pretend this never happened. You're delusional, Donahue said. Even without Daniels, we have enough to indict you for dozens of crimes. Do you? Or do you have digital evidence that could have been fabricated? Testimony from criminals I can discredit? Surveillance that proves nothing? Dodson's smile was predatory. I've been doing this for 20 years, Agent Donahue. I've outlasted 3 FBI task forces, 2 congressional investigations, and countless local prosecutors. What makes you think you'll be different? Jeremy slowly, carefully unzipped his laptop bag. Because this time you made mistakes. You got arrogant. You killed too many people, left too many witnesses. Witnesses? Dodson laughed. Like who? The flight attendant who saved you? That was quite clever of her, by the way. Federal Air Marshal Natasha Riley. Undercover for 2 years. I suppose I should have been more thorough in vetting my people. But it doesn't matter now. Once you 3 disappear, there's no case. Disappear, Jeremy repeated. His hand was in the bag now, fingers finding the laptop. You're going to kill us. Of course. But I'll make it look like an accident. Tactical operation gone wrong. Firefight with unknown assailants. Tragic loss of federal agents. I have people who can sell that story. And without you, the investigation dies. Natasha shifted slightly, drawing attention away from Jeremy. What about Carrie Lucas? Your girlfriend and hired assassin? You think she won't flip to save herself? Dodson's expression darkened. Carrie is loyal, unlike Roy Daniels, who betrayed me for empty promises. She understands that betraying me means death, not just for her, but for everyone she cares about. Does she know you're planning to disappear? Jeremy asked, laptop now open in the bag, fingers working blind to enter commands. Once you realize your operation is compromised, you'll vanish. New identity, new country. Does Carrie get to come, or is she another loose end? Shut up, Dodson snapped. Jeremy had struck a nerve. She's been your partner for 7 years. She's killed for you, lied for you, married me to monitor me. And when this is over, you'll ghost her like everyone else. Because that's what you do. You use people until they're no longer useful, then you eliminate them. I said shut up. Dodson stood, his composure cracking. Perfect. Jeremy hit the final command. Throughout the lodge, electronic locks engaged with quiet clicks. The lights went out, plunging everything into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, casting eerie red shadows. What the hell? One of the gunmen shouted. Jeremy was already moving. He swept the couch table toward the nearest guard, hitting him in the knees. Donahue tackled another. Natasha grabbed a fallen weapon. Gunfire erupted. Jeremy dove behind the couch as rounds tore through furniture. His laptop was still running commands, locking doors, killing communications, turning the lodge into a prison for Dodson's people. "Basement," he shouted to Natasha and Donahue. "There's a service tunnel." They fought their way toward a door, Natasha providing cover fire. Jeremy's system knowledge guided them. He knew every room, every corridor. He locked doors behind them, trapping Dodson's men in sections of the house. The basement was cold, dark, full of storage. And there, in the corner, was what Jeremy had suspected, a tunnel. Emergency escape route, probably built during the lodge's construction for exactly this kind of scenario. "Go!" Donahue pushed them toward it. Behind them, someone was trying to force the door. They had seconds. The tunnel was narrow, claustrophobic. They ran hunched over, flashlights cutting the darkness. Jeremy's mind raced. They'd escaped immediate death, but Dodson still had Agnes. Still had his network. Still had. The tunnel exit opened into the forest, 300 yards from the lodge. They emerged into cold air and darkness. Behind them, they could hear shouts, confusion. "My men," Donahue said into his radio, "fall back to secondary positions. Suspect is contained in the primary structure." "Sir," a voice crackled back. "We have visual on vehicles leaving the property. 3 SUVs, high speed, heading south." Dodson was running. "We need to move," Natasha said. "He'll regroup, grab Agnes as leverage, disappear." "No," Jeremy said quietly. "He won't get far." He held up his laptop. On the screen were GPS coordinates, tracking a signal. "What is that?" Donahue asked. "When I hacked the lodge's security system, I also accessed their vehicle management system. Every SUV Dodson owns has GPS tracking and remote access. I just disabled their ignition systems." Jeremy smiled grimly. "They'll make it about 2 miles before the engines die." Natasha stared at him. "You trapped him." "I trapped all of them. Every vehicle, every safe house, every property with a smart system. I've locked it all down. Dodson can run, but he can't hide. Not from someone who controls his entire digital infrastructure." Donahue was already calling for backup, coordinating with Wisconsin State Police. But Jeremy was thinking ahead. Dodson wouldn't surrender quietly. He'd fight, maybe take hostages, maybe kill Agnes out of spite. They needed to find her. Now, Roy Daniels, Jeremy said suddenly. He built these systems. He'll know where Dodson would hide a hostage. They had Daniels in protective custody at a Chicago safe house. One phone call, one desperate father given a chance to save his daughter. "There's an old warehouse," Daniels said, his voice shaking. "Near Gary, Indiana. Dodson used it for storage, but it's off the books. Abandoned steel mill property. If he needed somewhere to stash someone quietly, that's where." The race was on. Chapter 6, Blood in the Water. The abandoned steel mill loomed against the dawn sky. Skeletal remains of American industry, rust and decay spreading across 50 acres. Jeremy and the FBI tactical team approached from multiple angles, aerial surveillance confirming 2 heat signatures inside the main warehouse. One of them had to be Agnes. "We go in silent," Donahue ordered. "Suspect is likely armed, hostile, and desperate. We extract the hostage. We don't engage unless necessary." But Jeremy knew it wouldn't be that simple. Dodson was cornered, his empire collapsing. Desperate men made desperate choices. The warehouse was a maze of machinery and shadows. The team split up, clearing rooms methodically. Jeremy followed behind, his weapon drawn, but his real focus on his laptop. He'd hacked into the facility's old security cameras, piecing together a digital map of the interior. "Movement, northwest corner," he whispered into his radio. "2 people, looks like one is restrained." Natasha's team moved that direction. Jeremy followed, his heart pounding. They were close now. So close, too. A woman stepped out from behind a support column. Carrie Lucas, his wife, the woman he'd loved. She looked different. Gone was the warm, caring persona he'd known. This woman was cold, focused, holding a pistol with professional competence. Behind her, Jeremy could see Agnes Daniels tied to a chair. "Hello, Jeremy," Carrie said. "I thought you might figure out eventually." You always were clever. Let her go, Jeremy said. This is over. Dodson's in custody. His operation is finished. There's no point in more death. There's always a point. Carrie's smile was bitter. Craig called me 2 hours ago. Told me to eliminate the hostage and disappear. Just another loose end to tie up. That's what I am to him after 7 years. A loose end. Then don't do this, Natasha said, her weapon trained on Carrie. You can walk away. Testify against Dodson. Get immunity. Immunity? Carrie laughed. For the prosecutor I murdered in Miami? The IRS agent I poisoned? The 160 people on Flight 447 that I helped plan? She shook her head. There's no immunity for what I've done. There's just prison or death, and I'm not going to prison. Jeremy saw her finger tighten on the trigger, saw Agnes's terrified eyes, understood in that moment that Carrie wasn't bluffing. He moved before conscious thought, dove toward Carrie as she fired. The bullet meant for Agnes hit a support beam. He crashed in her, both of them hitting the concrete floor. The pistol skittered away. Carrie was stronger than she looked, trained in close combat. She got her hands around his throat, her face twisted with rage. You ruined everything, she screamed. We had it perfect. The money, the power, the life. And you had to go digging into things that weren't your business. Jeremy's vision was darkening. He couldn't breathe, but his hand found a piece of rebar on the floor. He swung it awkwardly, catching Carrie in the shoulder. She yelped, releasing him. He gasped for air, scrambling backward. Natasha was there suddenly, weapon aimed at Carrie. Don't move. Hands on your head. Carrie looked at Jeremy, and for just a moment, he saw something real in her eyes. Regret, maybe, or just recognition of the end. I did love you, she said quietly. At first, it was an assignment, but somewhere along the way, it became real. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Then she lunged for the pistol. 3 shots. Carrie Lucas collapsed, blood pooling beneath her. Jeremy stared at her body, feeling nothing. The woman he'd loved had never existed. This person, dying on the warehouse floor, was a stranger who'd worn his wife's face. Check the hostage, Donahue ordered. Agnes Daniels was alive, sobbing, unharmed. Medical teams rushed in. Jeremy stood slowly, his throat bruised, his world tilted on its axis. We have Dodson in custody, an agent reported. He tried to run on foot, made it half a mile. He's demanding a lawyer. He'll need a good one, Donahue said grimly. We have enough to put him away for 20 lifetimes. But Jeremy was thinking about loose ends, about a man like Dodson with resources and connections who'd slipped through the system before, about a justice system that sometimes failed. His phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. You won this round. Enjoy it while it lasts. CD. Dodson, even in custody, still had access to phones. Still had his network. Still believed he was untouchable. Jeremy looked at the message, then at Natasha. It's not over. You know that, right? He'll lawyer up, destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses. Even with everything we have, he might beat this. Then we make sure the case is airtight, she said. We've got Danielle's testimony, the blockchain evidence, the bodies from the lodge. We've got enough. Maybe. Jeremy wasn't convinced. Men like Dodson didn't go down easy. They had contingency plans, buried assets, people who'd kill to keep them free. The game wasn't over. It was just entering a new phase. Chapter 7. The Architect's Gambit. Craig Dodson's arrest made national news. Federal charges including money laundering, weapons trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder, and 100 other crimes. The headlines called it the biggest organized crime takedown in a decade. But Jeremy knew better. Watching from a safe house in suburban Milwaukee, he monitored the legal proceedings with growing frustration. Dodson had hired a team of expensive lawyers who were already poking holes in the prosecution's case. The blockchain evidence was circumstantial. Roy Daniels was a disgruntled employee with motive to lie. The lodge shootout was self-defense against an illegal FBI raid. They're going to get him off, Jeremy said to Natasha, who was recovering from her injuries. Watch. 6 months from now, Dodson walks on a technicality. Have faith in the system, she said, though she didn't sound convinced. Jeremy didn't have faith in the system anymore. The system had let Flight 447 happen, had let Dodson operate for 20 years, had put 160 people in a grave because bureaucracy and procedure moved too slowly. He spent his nights working, not on the prosecution's case. They had that. He was building something else, something that would ensure Dodson's downfall regardless of what happened in court. It started with the blockchain. Jeremy had complete access to Dodson's ghost wallet, the one Roy Daniels had built. Hundreds of millions in illegal transactions, carefully laundered through legitimate channels. The FBI had frozen the accounts, but Dodson's lawyers were fighting the asset seizure. What they didn't know was that Jeremy had copied everything. Every transaction, every wallet address, every offshore account. And he'd found something the FBI had missed, a pattern in the transactions that pointed to other criminal operations, other powerful men who'd used Dodson services. Politicians, CEOs, foreign officials, all of them implicated in various crimes, all of them with something to lose if their association with Dodson became public. Jeremy began reaching out. Anonymous emails to journalists, leaked documents to investigative reporters, carefully timed releases that connected Dodson to bigger scandals. Each revelation made it harder for Dodson's lawyers to claim their client was just a legitimate businessman caught in FBI overreach. "You're playing a dangerous game," John Donahue warned when he discovered what Jeremy was doing. "Leaking classified evidence, hacking restricted systems. You could be prosecuted." "I'm a dead man," Jeremy reminded him. "Officially, I died on Flight 447. Jeremy Long doesn't exist anymore. I'm a ghost, and ghosts can do things living men can't." But there was still a problem. Dodson's network was bigger than one man. Take him down, and someone else would rise to fill the vacuum. Jeremy needed to dismantle the entire operation, burn it to the ground so thoroughly that nothing could grow back. That meant identifying every person in Dodson's organization, every corrupted official, every hired killer, every money launderer and weapons dealer. It meant building a case against dozens of people simultaneously, overwhelming the legal system so completely that no amount of expensive lawyers could save them all. Roy Daniels helped. The IT manager knew the structure, knew where the bodies were buried. Between his testimony and Jeremy's digital forensics, they built a map of the entire criminal enterprise. "This is insane," Natasha said, looking at the scope. "You're talking about taking down 100 people. Coordinating with federal prosecutors, state attorneys, local police, it would take years. Or weeks," Jeremy said, "if we force their hand. Make them all scramble at once, expose them simultaneously. They can't cover up everything if it all hits at the same time." He called it Operation Cascade. One revelation leading to the next, each arrest triggering more investigations, the whole structure collapsing like dominoes. It required perfect timing, perfect coordination, and a willingness to bend rules that Jeremy had once considered sacred. He started with the FBI's corrupted agents, the ones feeding information to Dodson, sabotaging investigations. Jeremy used Dodson's own security footage against them, meetings, payoffs, communications. He delivered the evidence anonymously to internal affairs. Then the politicians, state senators who'd taken bribes, protected Dodson's operations. Jeremy leaked their financial records to investigative journalists, timing the stories to break during election season. Then the business partners, executives who'd knowingly enabled money laundering. Jeremy provided evidence to the SEC, the IRS, triggering multiple federal investigations. Each move was calculated, each exposure timed to maximize damage. Jeremy moved through Dodson's network like a virus, corrupting and destroying everything he touched. "You've become what you hated," Natasha observed one night, watching him work. "You're using illegal methods, destroying lives, operating outside the law." "I'm ensuring justice," Jeremy said coldly. "The kind that actually works." That's what Dodson would say. The words hit harder than he expected. Jeremy looked at her, really looked, saw the concern in her eyes. The woman who'd saved his life was worried he'd lost himself in his quest for revenge. "This isn't revenge," he said quietly. "It's revenge," she interrupted. "And I understand it. But you need to be careful, Jeremy. There's a line between justice and vengeance. Once you cross it, you can't come back. He didn't answer, because she was right, and they both knew it. He'd crossed lines he'd never imagined crossing, had become something he'd never wanted to be. But he'd finish this. He'd see it through to the end, whatever the cost. The trial was set for 6 months out. That gave Jeremy 6 months to dismantle everything Dodson had built. 6 months to ensure that even if Dodson somehow beat the federal charges, he'd have nothing left to return to. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. Chapter 8, The Breaking Point. 3 months into Operation Cascade, Craig Dodson's empire was crumbling. 47 arrests across 7 states. 3 senators under indictment. Major banking institutions facing fraud charges. The FBI had seized over $500 million in assets. But Dodson himself remained free on bail. $10 million, barely a fraction of his hidden wealth. He wore an ankle monitor, restricted to his Lake Forest mansion, but he still had power, still had connections, and he was fighting back. Jeremy first noticed it when Roy Daniels disappeared. The IT manager had been in witness protection, preparing for testimony. Then one morning, his handlers found his safe house empty. No signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play. Daniels had simply vanished. He ran, Donahue said, but his tone suggested he didn't believe it. 2 days later, Daniels' body was found in a dumpster outside Indianapolis. Professional hit, single bullet to the head. Agnes was immediately moved to a more secure location, but the message was clear. Dodson could still reach his enemies. "We need to accelerate," Jeremy told the prosecution team. "Move up the trial. Get him in front of a jury before he eliminates more witnesses." But the legal system moved slowly. Motions, counter-motions, discovery requests. Dodson's lawyers were masters of delay, and every day that passed was another day for him to work his influence. Then Jeremy's mother disappeared. He'd kept her in protective custody, but Patricia Long was stubborn. She'd insisted on maintaining some normalcy, some connection to her old life. One supervised shopping trip. That's all it took. Her FBI escort was found unconscious in a parking garage. Patricia was gone. Jeremy received a video on his burner phone 6 hours later. His mother, alive but terrified, in an undisclosed location. And Craig Dodson's voice, calm and reasonable. "I think it's time we talked, Jeremy. Really talked. Man to man. No guns or lawyers or federal agents. Just you and me." The video ended with an address. An abandoned warehouse in Gary. Not the same one where they'd rescued Agnes, but close. Familiar territory, which meant Dodson wanted him comfortable. Wanted him to think he had the advantage. "It's a trap," Natasha said immediately. "He'll kill you and your mother both." "Maybe," Jeremy agreed. "Or maybe he's desperate enough to negotiate. You can't go alone. If I bring backup, he kills her. You know that." Jeremy checked his weapon, his laptop, his encrypted drives. Everything he'd need. This ends tonight, one way or another. Donahue tried to stop him, threatened to arrest him for his own protection. But Jeremy was already gone, a ghost moving through Chicago's industrial district. The warehouse was exactly what he expected. Maze of metal and shadows, strategic positions for ambush. Jeremy entered with his hands raised, weapon holstered, laptop bag over his shoulder. "I'm here, Dodson. Let her go." His mother emerged from the darkness, escorted by 2 armed men. She looked shaken but unharmed. Their eyes met, and Jeremy saw both relief and terror in her expression. Then Craig Dodson stepped into view, and Jeremy understood the real trap. Dodson was wearing a dead man's switch, a device connected wirelessly to multiple explosives planted throughout the warehouse. Kill him, and everything detonated. Let him live, and he had leverage. "Clever," Jeremy admitted. "I've had 3 months to plan this," Dodson said. 3 months of watching my empire burn while you played vigilante. Did you really think I'd let that go unanswered? What do you want? Everything you've stolen from me. Every file, every backup, every piece of evidence you've compiled. Delete it all right now while I watch. In exchange, your mother lives and we call it even. And if I refuse, then we all die here. You, me, Your mother, my man. I'm facing life in prison, Jeremy. At my age, that's a death sentence anyway. So I have nothing to lose by taking everyone with me. Jeremy looked at his mother, at Dodson, at the situation that had no clean solution. Why Flight 447? He asked quietly. Why kill all those people? You could have just killed me specifically. Because I needed it to look like an accident. One targeted assassination, and people start asking questions. A plane crash? Tragedy, but not a mystery. Dodson's expression was flat, emotionless. Acceptable losses for operational security. You're a monster, Patricia Long whispered. I'm a businessman who made hard choices. No different from any CEO who's ever downsized or any general who's ever sent troops in a battle. The only difference is honesty. I don't pretend my decisions don't have consequences. Jeremy's mind was racing through scenarios. The dead man's switch was wireless, which meant it could be hacked. But he'd need time, need distraction. And one wrong move meant everyone died. Let my mother go first, he said. Then we negotiate. No, she stays until you've deleted everything. Insurance policy. Then we have a problem. Jeremy slowly pulled out his laptop. Because I'm not deleting anything without assurance she's safe. For 30 seconds, they stared at each other. Then Dodson nodded to his men. Put her in the car. Engine running, ready to leave. But if Jeremy tries anything, bring her back. They led Patricia away. Jeremy could hear a car door slam, an engine start. Good. She was clear of the blast radius. Now came the hard part. Jeremy opened his laptop, hands steady despite the adrenaline. I'll need to access my servers. Encrypted connections, remote deletion. It'll take time. You have 10 minutes. Jeremy's fingers flew across the keyboard. But he wasn't deleting files. He was accessing every digital system in the area. Traffic cameras, cell towers, police dispatch. And most importantly, the wireless frequencies in the warehouse. He found a dead man's switch signal, found the explosives detonation codes, and found a vulnerability. The system was old, Russian military surplus. He'd dealt with similar systems before, knew their weaknesses. Done, he said, showing dots on the screen. False deletion confirmations, faked but convincing. All gone. Every file, every backup. Your empire is yours again. Dodson studied the screen, then nodded. Smart man. You know when to fold. Now we can all walk away from this, and Jeremy hit the command he'd been preparing. The warehouse's emergency sprinkler system activated, flooding everything with water. Simultaneously, he sent a signal that jammed the wireless frequencies, breaking the connection between Dodson's dead man's switch and the explosives. What did you? Dodson started to say. Jeremy tackled him. They crashed to the wet floor, struggling. Dodson's men raised their weapons, but the sprinklers had shorted out half the lights. Gunfire erupted wildly. Then the FBI tactical team burst through the doors. Donahue had been waiting outside, ready to move the moment Jeremy gave the signal, the sprinklers activating. Federal agents, drop your weapons. It was chaos. Water, gunfire, shouting. Jeremy wrestled with Dodson, both of them fighting for control. The older man was stronger than he looked, desperate and violent. You destroyed everything. Dodson screamed, his hands finding Jeremy's throat. Everything. Jeremy's vision darkened, but his hand found Dodson's forgotten pistol, knocked loose in the struggle. He brought it up, pressed it against Dodson's chest. This is for Flight 447, he said, and pulled the trigger. The shot was deafening. Dodson collapsed, blood spreading across the wet concrete. His eyes were wide, disbelieving. The great Craig Dodson, brought down by the one man he'd underestimated. Jeremy stood slowly, the pistol falling from his hands. Around him, FBI agents were securing the scene, arresting Dodson's men. Natasha rushed to him, checking for injuries. Jeremy? Jeremy, are you okay? He wasn't okay. Might never be okay again. He just killed a man in cold blood. Not self-defense, but execution. Crossed the final line he'd sworn never to cross. But looking at Dodson's body, thinking of all the lives destroyed, he found, I'm fine, he lied. Is my mother safe? Already on her way to a hospital for evaluation. Natasha's expression was concerned. What you did, Jeremy. The shooting. That wasn't self-defense. I know. This will have consequences. I know, he repeated. But it's done. He's done. And I can live with that. Could he, though? That was the question he'd wrestle with for the rest of his life. Chapter 9. Justice Earned. The aftermath of Craig Dodson's death rippled through the criminal underworld like a shockwave. His organization collapsed completely. No central figure to hold it together, no network of corrupted officials to protect it. Operation Cascade had done its job. By the time Dodson died, there was nothing left to save. The FBI cleared Jeremy of wrongdoing in the shooting. Self-defense, they ruled. Dodson had been reaching for a weapon, had threatened multiple lives, had been the subject of an active federal arrest warrant. Justified use of force. Jeremy knew the truth. Donahue knew it. Natasha knew it. But they all agreed it was better this way. Better than years of trials, appeals, potential acquittals. Better than letting a monster like Dodson work the system he corrupted. Justice, but not the legal kind. 3 months after Dodson's death, Jeremy Long officially came back from the dead. A complicated process involving witness protection, falsified records, and federal pardons for his more questionable actions. He couldn't return to his old life. Too many people knew his face, knew his story, but he could have a new one. He chose Seattle. Far from Chicago, far from the memories. He opened a cybersecurity consulting firm, this time working exclusively on the right side of the law. His reputation brought clients immediately. Everyone wanted the man who'd taken down Craig Dodson. Patricia Long moved nearby, living in a quiet suburb. They had dinner every Sunday. Neither of them talked about what had happened in that warehouse. Some things were better left unsaid. Natasha Riley accepted a promotion to lead a new FBI task force focused on cyber-enabled organized crime. They stayed in touch, emails, occasional visits. Something between them, maybe, but neither pushed it. They'd lived through too much darkness together. Agnes Daniels graduated from Northwestern with honors, changed her name, and disappeared into a quiet life. Her father's sacrifice had saved her. Jeremy hoped she found peace. Of the 100 people arrested in Operation Cascade, 94 were convicted. The remaining 6 died before trial, some in prison fights, some in mysterious accidents. Dodson's network cleaning house, eliminating loose ends. Jeremy didn't feel guilty about that. They'd made their choices. 1 year after Flight 447, Jeremy attended the memorial service in Chicago. 160 names read aloud. 160 lives remembered. Families sobbed. Politicians made speeches. The media covered it extensively. Jeremy stood in the back, anonymous in a crowd of mourners. He didn't deserve to be there. Not after what he'd done, what he'd become. But he needed to pay his respects. Needed to remember why it had all mattered. A woman approached him afterward. Mid-50s, elegant with sad eyes. "You're Jeremy Long," she said quietly. "I recognize you from the news." He nodded, tensed for accusation. Instead, she took his hand. "My daughter was on that flight. Sarah Chun. She was 26, flying home from a business trip." The woman's voice cracked. "I just wanted to say thank you for making sure the man responsible didn't walk away, for getting justice when the system might have failed." Jeremy didn't know what to say. What could he say? That he'd killed a man? That he'd become something dark and violent in pursuit of revenge? That their daughter's death had been the catalyst for his own moral collapse? "I'm sorry for your loss," he managed. She squeezed his hand. "You gave us closure. That's more than most families get. Thank you." She walked away, leaving Jeremy standing alone with his thoughts. Had been worth it? The lies, the manipulation, the violence? He'd destroyed Craig Dodson's empire, brought down 100 criminals, saved future victims. But he'd also become someone his younger self wouldn't recognize. Someone who could kill in cold blood and sleep soundly afterward. The answer, he decided, was complicated. That night, alone in his Seattle apartment, Jeremy opened his laptop. He still had copies of everything. Dodson's files, the blockchain evidence, the network map. Insurance, in case anyone tried to rebuild the empire. But also a reminder of what he'd fought against, of what he'd almost become. An email arrived from Natasha. How are you holding up? He considered his response carefully. Better. Some days harder than others. You? Same. The world's a little safer now. That's something. It's everything. He closed the laptop and looked out at Seattle's skyline. Somewhere out there, other criminals were building other empires. Other Craig Dodsons were destroying lives. The fight never really ended. But for now, Jeremy Long had won his war. He'd survived, he'd gotten justice for Flight 447, and he'd dismantled an organization that had killed countless people. The cost had been high. His innocence, his wife, his old life, pieces of his soul. But looking at Sarah Chin's mother, remembering her gratitude, Jeremy decided it had been worth it. Not everyone got justice. Not everyone got closure. But for the victims of Flight 447, for Roy Daniels, for every life Craig Dodson had destroyed, they'd gotten both. And Jeremy Long, the ghost who refused to stay dead, could finally rest. The end. Epilogue. 2 years later, Jeremy received an encrypted email. No sender, no trace, routed through a dozen proxy servers. Inside was a video file. He opened it cautiously. The footage showed a woman in a hospital bed, recovering from extensive surgery. Her face was bandaged, but her eyes were visible. Carrie Lucas's eyes. "Hello, Jeremy," her recorded voice said. "I bet you thought I was dead. So did I for a while. But I'm harder to kill than you think. I've had 2 years to recover, to plan, to think about everything that happened. And I've decided something." She leaned closer to the camera. "You destroyed Craig. You destroyed his empire. You became exactly what you hated to do it. And I think, in a strange way, I'm proud of you. You beat him at his own game." A pause. Then, "But he wasn't the only one playing that game. There are others, Jeremy. Bigger than Craig, more dangerous, more connected. And now that you've proven yourself, now that you've shown what you're capable of," her smile was visible even through the